Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce Ms. Bridget Gabriel, CEO and President of ACT for America. Bridget, I'm absolutely delighted to have you here today. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I am honored to be here today. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and privilege to be here today speaking in defense of Jews worldwide and the evils of anti-Semitism. As you notice, I am wearing a Star of David. This necklace was given to me by a man during a book signing in Dallas, Texas. This necklace belonged to his wife, who died in a tragic accident. He said to me, crying, "This necklace was my wife's favorite. She died wearing it. She considered you her hero for your work for the Jewish people. I want you to have it. Promise me you'll wear it." I couldn't find a more befitting time to honor her and her memory than now, wearing this Star of David as a Lebanese, giving a keynote speech at the United Nations in defense of the Jewish people. We are here today to address the rise of global anti-Semitism. 10 years ago, Nathan Sharansky explained, classical and anti-Semitism is aimed at the Jewish people or the Jewish religion. New anti-Semitism is aimed at the Jewish state. Mr. Sharansky devised what he called the 3D test. The 3Ds are demonization, double standards, and delegitimization. Demonization is making bizarre, ugly claims that have no basis in reality. Comparisons between Israel and the Nazis, or assertions that Israel has been committing genocide against the Palestinians, are examples of demonization. Such claims are nonsense. If Israel has been committing genocide against the Palestinians, then why has the population of Palestinians increased more than 600% since 1948? Israel must be the most incompetent mass murderer in the history of the world. When Israel is held to a standard that no other country in the world would be expected to meet, that double standard is itself anti-Semitism. For instance, Israel is a vibrant democracy where human rights are protected and respected. And yet the United Nations so-called Human Rights Commission spends most of its time and effort investigating and condemning Israel, while they gloss over or ignore the massive and continuing human rights violations that occur in Iran, Cuba, China, and many other brutal, repressive atrocities. Delegitimization of Israel is to assert that of all the people in the world, only the Jewish people do not have a right to a statehood. In fact, Israel's historical, legal, and moral right to exist as a Jewish state is a codified principle of international law. This codification is explicitly based on the long, continuous, and well-documented connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. To deny the connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is anti-Semitism in its purest form. But why should anti-Semitism matter to the rest of the world? Why should the world care? It should, not merely because it's morally repugnant, which it most definitely is. The world should care about anti-Semitism because of fundamental self-preservation. The stark truth is that the world stands at the edge of a deep, dark precipice. At the bottom lurks another Holocaust that has already begun. This time, the genocide is not only against the Jews. The so-called Islamic State had made it abundantly clear that it can be committed against non-Jews. ISIS persecuting and killing members of every religious, ethnic, and nationalistic community they encounter. ISIS is slaughtering Syrians, Iraqis, Lebanese, Palestinians. ISIS is slaughtering Christians, Sunnis, Shiites, Alawites, Kurds, Druze, and Yazidis. ISIS floods the internet with stomach-churning images and videos of mass executions, severed heads, and crucifixions. We see children slaughtered in front of their parents and parents slaughtered in front of their children. This viciousness is a part of a calculated strategy explicitly intended to terrorize anyone and everyone who does not submit to their version of Islam. ISIS has officially declared its intent to rule the world. Their founding document, the declaration of their caliphate, bears the modest title, هَذَا وَعْدُ اللَّهِ. It means in Arabic, this is the promise of God. They declare that God promised to Muslim, quote, leadership of the world and mastership of the earth, end quote. Their declaration of a worldwide caliphate reveals their governing philosophy. Quote, by Allah, if you disbelieve in democracy, secularism, nationalism, as well as all the other garbage and ideas from the West, and rush to your religion and creed, then by Allah, you will own the earth, and the East and the West will submit to you. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, savagery is not merely their strategy. It is an article of their faith. They commit genocide in the name of Allah. Israel has been familiar with the concept and the reality of genocide in the name of Allah for a long time. The war that ISIS has declared on the world is the same war as the war that Hamas has been waging against Israel for decades. The only difference, again, is focus. ISIS seeks a worldwide caliphate. Hamas is focused on the destruction of Israel. However, their motivation, methods, and morals are the same. In terms of brutal methods and lack of morals, ISIS has recently shot, hacked, and killed its way to the top of the world's terrorist organizations. Meanwhile, Hamas has been committing mind-numbing mass atrocities for decades. They used to wrap their children in dynamite and nails and send them to blow up Israeli buses and restaurants. They rejoiced at the death of Israeli children and glorified the death of their own. Today, they use them as a human shield. I know something about children being used as human shields. In 1976, when I was 11 years old, Palestinians in South Lebanon used me and my family as human shields. They employed exactly the same technique that Hamas uses in Gaza today. They set up artillery or rocket launchers in front of my bomb shelter and fired a barrage towards Israel. They would pack up and run as quickly as possible, leaving my family to the devastation of return fire. Today, Hamas hides behind human shields on a much larger scale. Hamas routinely uses schools, mosques, hospitals, and other civilian locations for weapons storage, missile launch sites, and other military purposes. They fire rockets on martyrs from these places with the explicit intention of drawing return fire from the Israelis, hoping that they will produce photogenic civilian corpses for display in the media. Hamas and ISIS share a common motivation. They want to impose Islam. This is the Charter of Hamas, and it is in ISIS's declaration of the Caliphate. The Charter of Hamas declares that, quote, Israel will exist and will continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it, end quote. The most revealing words in the Hamas Charter are a quotation from Islamic scripture. The day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews. The stones and trees will say, "O Muslim, O Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." This is from Hadith of Sahih Muslim, book 41. But Hamas has a problem. In Israel, Jews don't hide behind stones or trees. In Israel, Jews stand up and defend themselves. Israelis have learned from history that if someone repeatedly says they're going to kill you, they mean it. A lesson the world is only now learning. 70 years ago, the world stood by as the Jews of Europe went out the chimneys. Today, the Jews of Israel aren't going to go quietly into the slaughter as they sit on the front line of fighting for Western civilization, fighting for all of us. Those who seek to exterminate the Jews are not going to stop with the Jews. That should have been the lesson of the Holocaust. That must be the lesson of the rise of ISIS. Once the international mass murder of innocent civilians was legitimized against Israel, it was legitimized everywhere, constrained by nothing more than the strong-held beliefs of those who would become the mass murderers. Because the Palestinians were encouraged by most of the world to believe that the murder of innocent Israeli civilians is a legitimate tactic to advance their Palestinian cause, the Islamists believe that they may commit mass murder anywhere in the world to advance their holy cause. As a result, we suffer from a plague of terrorism, Islamic terrorism, from Moscow to Madrid, from Bali to Beslan, from Nairobi to New York, authored and perfected by the Palestinians. Israel and the United States are not separate targets of Islamic terrorism. The whole world is their target, and the world better learn this lesson and learn it fast. Evil dwells when courageous men become bystanders. Lies spread when the informed become silent. Society deteriorates when apathy replaces activism. Tyranny comes when leaders become mediocre and haters become organized. Today, we are summoned to lead in our communities and our nations. We are summoned to wake up the apathetic and inspire the despaired, to silence the liars and educate the concerned, to speak tolerance instead of resentment, forgiveness instead of revenge, love instead of hate, peace instead of war. We are here at the United Nations today because each one of us is a leader and an instrument of change with history as our final judge. How will we be judged? I, as a leader of ActForAmerica.org, the largest national security organization in America, with chapters in 11 countries around the world, am committed to do whatever possible we can to stand up with the Jewish people and defend them. The civilized world must band together in solidarity to ensure that people of all faiths can live in peace and harmony, and that Jews are never persecuted and victimized by barbaric, murderous ideologies ever again. That Jews can walk in any street in the world with their head held high and safe. That Israel, the Jewish state, the only democracy in the Middle East, continues to shine as a beacon of light in the darkest regions of the world. Thank you for having me here today. It's been an honor. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
For every opinion or belief someone may hold, there will be another party who just as strongly oppose that idea. Both sides usually claim to sit with the best arguments, the real facts, and the correct worldview, and ironically, both sides regard the other as being indoctrinated, blind to the obvious and outright stupid. Most people only expose themselves to information that matches their own worldview. It is uncomfortable to do otherwise. Still, we would like to give you some surprising information about Islam. We also urge you to look further than only mainstream media, and if you can find the time for it, read the Quran yourself. To get you started, we'd like to present you 3 things you probably did not know about Islam. 1. Islam has not been hijacked. That Islam has been hijacked is what non-Muslims naturally assume, because they assume all religions are the same. The reason non-Muslims are so easily confused is that most of us don't realize the difference between the Quran and every other religious book we are familiar with. The Christian Bible is a collection of writings from various authors, written sometimes hundreds of years apart, with parables, advice and dreams, all collected together into one book. Same with the Jewish Torah. Even those of us in the West, who are neither Christians nor Jews, are still familiar enough with these religions to know this much, and therefore we assume the same is true for the Quran. But the Quran is only one book written by one man in his own lifetime. It is meant to be taken literally, and it is not full of symbolism or vague analogies. It is mostly direct commands. Of course, the Quran contains contradictory statements, just like other religious books. But the Quran itself provides the reader with a way to know what to do with the contradictions. It's explained in the Quran that if you have two passages that contradict each other, the one written later supersedes the one written earlier. Most Westerners are unaware that the peaceful, tolerant passages were written early in Muhammad's prophetic career. According to the Quran, those passages have been abrogated by later, more violent and less tolerant passages. So, when most Westerners hear jihadists quoting violent passages from the Quran, and then peaceful Muslims quoting peaceful passages, they interpret that the way they would if someone was quoting the Bible or the Torah. They think to themselves, oh, there must be many different and contradictory passages, like there are in other religious books, so Muslims can pick and choose what they like and justify whatever actions they want to take. But the Quran is nothing like that. There is no picking and choosing. It says very explicitly and in no uncertain terms that a Muslim must not alter or ignore any part of its very clear and direct message, or they will burn in a fiery torment forever. Two, striving to institute worldwide Sharia law is a religious duty. Many people don't realize how politically oriented Islam is at its core. In fact, Islam is less of a religion than it is a religious ideology. It includes a mandatory and highly specific legal and political plan for the whole society, Sharia. There is no separation between the religious and the political in Islam. Rather, Islam and Sharia constitute a totalitarian means of ordering society at every level, including ritual worship, transactions and contracts, morals and manners, beliefs and punishments. In the Quran, Allah makes it clear that man-made governments, such as a democracy, and free speech, such as criticizing the Quran, are abominations and must be eliminated. The modern expression creeping Sharia is used to describe the slow, deliberate and methodical advance of Islamic law in non-Muslim countries. Official Sharia courts already operate in the UK, handling cases ranging from divorce and financial disputes to domestic violence. Attempts to introduce Sharia in the legal system in Germany, Sweden and other European countries are ongoing. While Sharia already has a foot in our door in the matter of minor disputes like inheritance and domestic violence, it should concern you that Sharia commands that drinkers and gamblers should be whipped, allows husbands to hit their wives, allows an injured plaintiff to exact legal revenge, literally an eye for an eye, commands that a thief must have a hand cut off, commands that homosexuals must be executed, orders unmarried fornicators to be whipped and adulterers to be stoned to death, orders death for both Muslim and non-Muslim critics of Muhammad, the Quran and even Sharia itself, orders apostates to be killed, commands offensive, aggressive and unjust jihad. As written in the Quran, Sharia is the law of Allah. Any other form of government is a sin. It is the duty of every Muslim to keep striving until all governments have been converted to Sharia law. Three, Muslims are allowed to deceive non-Muslims if it helps Islam. For non-Muslims, this principle, called taqiyya, is another surprising concept of Islam. While most other religions speak highly of truthfulness, the Quran instructs Muslims to lie to non-Muslims about their beliefs and their political ambitions to protect and spread Islam. There are many examples of today's Islamic leaders saying one thing in English for the Western press and then saying something entirely different to their own followers in Arabic a few days later. Deceiving the enemy is always useful in war, and Islam is at war with the non-Islamic world until the whole world follows Sharia law. All non-Muslims living in non-Islamic states are therefore enemies. So deceiving Westerners is totally acceptable, even encouraged, if it can forward the goals of the spread of Islam. As a recent example, the Islamic American Relief Agency were seemingly raising money for orphans, but in fact giving the money to terrorists. They deceived good-hearted Western infidels into giving money to organizations that were actively killing Western infidels. Do the research yourself, this is not an isolated case. Islam as a religion of peace. Muslim organizations worldwide often declare that Islam is a religion of peace. But what does that really mean? It seems easy for a Muslim to quote a peaceful verse from the early parts of the Quran, while, by following the principle of taqiyya, neglecting to mention the fact that it has been officially abrogated by later, more violent verses. According to the Quran, the world will be at peace only when Islam and Sharia reign in every country, and never until then. This is why every Muslim can truthfully say that Islam is a religion of peace. If any of these points took you by surprise, then there is surely much more you still don't know. This subject will affect you in the near future, so take the chance to inform yourself now before it does.
This agreement, I'm not considering it more than the agreement which had been signed between our Prophet Muhammad and Quraysh. And you remember, Khalifa Umar had refused this agreement and considering it sulh al-daniyya, but Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam had accepted it. And we are accepting now this peace accord.